Lavra Mitchell had served Earth Command for 15 years. She had been present at first contact with 7 different alien species. She had seen things that would give most people nightmares for the rest of their lives. But standing in that throne room, surrounded by thousands of angry Volrathi, she had never felt more afraid. The Emperor was waiting. The entire court was waiting. And Daniel stood in the center of it all, his eyes still fixed on the floor, fighting a battle that no one else could see. Lavra cleared her throat and began to speak. "Your Majesty, humans come from a world called Earth. It is what we call a death world." A murmur ran through the crowd. The term death world was known throughout the galaxy. It referred to planets where the conditions were so harsh, so dangerous, that intelligent life should never have been able to evolve there. Most species avoided death worlds entirely. The idea that humans came from such a place made many of the nobles shift uncomfortably. "On Earth," Lavra continued, "everything is designed to kill. The weather can freeze you or burn you. The water can drown you or poison you. The animals can eat you, sting you, or crush you. Even the plants can be deadly." She paused to let her words sink in. Humans survived on this world not because we were the strongest. We were not. Not because we were the fastest. We were not that either. We survived because we were stubborn. Because we refused to die. And because we developed certain traits. The Emperor leaned forward slightly. His anger had faded, replaced by something that looked like curiosity. "What kind of traits?" Lavra glanced at Daniel before answering. "Our eyes, Your Majesty. Human eyes are not just tools for seeing. They are weapons." The word weapons sent a ripple of alarm through the court. Several guards moved their hands toward their blades. But the Emperor raised his hand, commanding silence. "Continue," he said. "When a human looks at another being, really looks at them, our ancient brain wakes up. This is the part of us that kept our ancestors alive millions of years ago. It looks at whatever we are seeing and asks 3 questions. Is this creature a threat? Is this creature food? Or is this creature family?" Princess Valentia had been listening in silence. Now she took a small step forward, her purple skin slowly shifting toward a lighter shade. She was beginning to understand that something deeper was happening here. "Your people see eye contact as respect," Lavra said gently. "And it is respect for humans too. But it is also much more than that. When a human looks into another being's eyes for too long, a bond begins to form. A connection that goes deeper than words, deeper than thought." She turned to look directly at the princess. "Commander Hayes has not been avoiding your gaze because he finds you unworthy of his attention. He's been avoiding it because he finds you too worthy. Because the first time he looked at you, his ancient brain made a decision that he did not ask it to make." The Emperor stood up from his throne. He was very tall, nearly 7 feet, and his shadow fell across Daniel like a dark blanket. "What decision?" Daniel finally spoke. His voice was quiet but steady. "The decision that she belongs with me." The words hit the room like a physical force. Several nobles gasped. Others stepped backward as if Daniel had threatened them. The princess's skin cycled through several colors in rapid succession, too fast for Daniel to read. "I do not mean that as an insult," Daniel said quickly. "I do not mean it as a claim or a demand. I know that Princess Valentia is not mine. She does not belong to anyone but herself. But my brain, the ancient part that I cannot control, does not understand that." He finally raised his head, though he kept his eyes closed. The pain on his face was clear for everyone to see. "When I first saw her, something inside me woke up. Something that has been sleeping since my ancestors lived in caves and hunted with stone tools. It looked at your daughter, Your Majesty, and it decided that she was the most important thing in the universe. That I should protect her, provide for her, Never let her out of my sight. He took a shaky breath. I have been fighting that voice for 3 days. Every moment of every hour, it tells me to look at her, to go to her, to claim her as my own. And every moment, I refuse. Because she deserves better than to be the object of some primitive instinct. Because I will not let my biology turn me into a monster. The throne room was absolutely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the guards seemed frozen in place. Emperor Zurath walked slowly down the steps from his throne. His footsteps echoed in the quiet room like the beating of a drum. He stopped directly in front of Daniel, close enough to touch. "Open your eyes, human," the Emperor commanded. "Look at me." Daniel hesitated for only a moment. Then he opened his eyes and met the Emperor's gaze. The Volrethi ruler studied the human carefully. He looked at Daniel's eyes, searching for something. What he found there made his skin shift to a color Daniel had never seen before. It was soft and warm, like golden sunset. "I see no monster in your eyes, Commander Hayes," the Emperor said quietly. "I see a man at war with himself. A man who is suffering greatly so that others do not have to suffer." He turned to look at his daughter. Valentia's skin had settled into a soft pink color, and her eyes were wide with wonder. "Daughter, come here," the Emperor said. Valentia walked down from the throne platform. Her steps were graceful and silent on the polished floor. She stopped beside her father, only a few feet away from Daniel. "Look at him," the Emperor instructed. "Tell me what you see." The princess studied Daniel's face. She saw the tension in his jaw, the tightness around his eyes, the way his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. She saw the sweat on his forehead and the slight trembling in his shoulders. "I see someone in pain," she said softly. "Someone who is hurting himself to avoid hurting me." "Yes," the Emperor agreed. "That is what I see as well." He placed one hand on Daniel's shoulder. The touch was surprisingly gentle for such a powerful being. "Commander Hayes, in all my centuries of life, I have met many suitors who wanted my daughter's hand. Princes from distant worlds. Generals who had won great victories. Merchants with wealth beyond counting. They all looked at her with hungry eyes. They all saw her as a prize to be won." He shook his head slowly. None of them ever considered what she might want. None of them ever thought about her feelings, her choices, her freedom. They only thought about themselves. The Emperor's grip on Daniel's shoulder tightened slightly. "But you, human, you have done something I have never seen before. You have denied yourself. You have suffered. You have let my daughter think badly of you. Let my entire court think you were rude and disrespectful. All because you did not want to take away her choice." Daniel's vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall. "She deserves to choose for herself." "Everyone does." The Emperor nodded slowly. Yes, they do." He turned to address his court. His voice rang out clear and strong, reaching every corner of the massive room. "My people, we have judged this human harshly. We saw his averted gaze and thought him rude. We saw his distance and thought him cold. But we were wrong." He gestured toward Daniel. "This man carries within him a fire that could consume everything in its path. But instead of letting that fire burn freely, he has contained it. He has suffered in silence so that my daughter would not be made uncomfortable. He has sacrificed his own mission, his own reputation, possibly even his own sanity, to protect her right to choose her own path." The Emperor paused, letting his words settle over the crowd. "That is not the behavior of a monster. That is the behavior of a true noble soul." The throne room of the Volrethi Empire was the most beautiful place Daniel Hayes had ever seen. Giant crystal pillars rose from the floor to the ceiling, each one glowing with soft blue light. The walls were made of polished black stone that reflected everything like a dark mirror. Thousands of alien nobles stood in perfect rows, their silver skin shimmering as they watched the humans standing alone in the center of the room. Daniel kept his eyes on the floor. He had been doing this for 3 days now, and his neck hurt from looking down so much. But he could not look up. He would not look up. No matter what happened, he had to keep his eyes away from her. The Velrathi were tall and thin, with bodies that seemed too graceful to be real. Their skin changed colors based on their feelings. Blue meant they were calm. Red meant they were angry. Purple meant they were sad or ashamed. Right now, most of the nobles in the room were shifting between orange and yellow. Daniel had learned that these colors meant confusion and curiosity. They were all wondering the same thing. Why did this human refuse to look at anyone? High Emperor Zorath sat on his throne at the far end of the room. The throne was carved from a single massive crystal, and it glowed brighter than anything else in the chamber. The emperor was old by Velrathi standards, nearly 800 years, but he still looked strong and powerful. He had 4 eyes, like all his people. 2 larger ones in the normal position, and 2 smaller ones above them. All 4 of those eyes were fixed on Daniel with growing anger. Standing beside the emperor was his daughter, Princess Valentia. She was young, only 150 years old, which was barely an adult among her kind. Her skin was the color of moonlight, and her eyes held the depth of distant galaxies. She was, by any standard in any corner of the universe, absolutely beautiful, and Daniel had not looked at her once since he arrived. This was supposed to be a simple mission. Earth needed new trade routes through Velrathi space. The Velrathi controlled some of the most important hyperspace lanes in the galaxy, and without their cooperation, human ships had to take paths that were 3 times longer and 10 times more dangerous. The Earth Council had sent Daniel because he was their best negotiator. He had closed deals with 6 different alien species. He had never failed. But no one had told him about the princess. On his first day in the palace, Valentia had been assigned as his guide. This was a great honor, the emperor had explained. His own daughter would show the human their world and teach him their ways. Daniel had bowed deeply and thanked the emperor for his kindness. Then he had made the mistake of looking at Valentia, just for a moment, just a quick glance. But that moment had changed everything. Something ancient had awakened inside Daniel. Something that humans had carried in their blood for millions of years. He had felt his heart beat faster. His hands had started to shake. A voice in the back of his mind, a voice that came from the deepest part of his brain, had whispered one word over and over again. Mine. Daniel had immediately looked away. He had spent the rest of that day staring at walls, floors, and ceilings. Anywhere but at the princess. He knew what was happening to him, and he knew he had to fight it. The problem was that Velrathi culture was built entirely around eye contact. Looking someone in the eyes was the highest form of respect. When you met someone important, you looked at them. When you made a promise, you looked at them. When you showed gratitude or affection, you looked at them. To look away was the worst insult possible. For 3 days, Daniel had insulted every single person he had met. He had insulted the guards who escorted him. He had insulted the servants who brought him food. He had insulted the nobles who tried to speak with him. And worst of all, he had insulted the princess who had been nothing but kind and welcoming. Laura Mitchell, his assistant and handler from Earth Command, had tried to help him. She had made excuses. She had told the Velrathi that Daniel had an eye condition. She had said that humans sometimes needed to rest their eyes after long space travel. But the excuses were running out, and the Velrathi were running out of patience. Now, standing in the throne room with the entire imperial court watching, Daniel knew that the moment of truth had arrived. The emperor leaned forward on his throne. The crystal beneath him pulsed with red light, matching his growing anger. "Commander Hayes," the emperor said. His voice was deep and powerful. filling every corner of the massive room. You have been a guest in my home for 3 days. I have given you the finest rooms. I have fed you the best food. I have assigned my own daughter to be your companion and guide. Daniel swallowed hard. Yes, Your Majesty, and I am grateful for your kindness. Grateful? The Emperor's skin flashed bright red. You have a strange way of showing gratitude, human. In 3 days, you have not once looked at my daughter. Not once have you shown her the basic respect that even a servant would receive. The nobles around the room began to whisper. Their voices mixed together like the sound of wind through leaves. Daniel could feel their judgment pressing against him from all sides. Princess Valenthia stood perfectly still beside her father's throne. Her skin had turned a deep purple, the color of shame. She believed that she had done something wrong. She thought that Daniel found her ugly or offensive in some way. Tears that glowed faint blue gathered in the corners of her eyes. Seeing her pain, even from the corner of his vision, made Daniel's chest hurt. He wanted to tell her that she had done nothing wrong. He wanted to explain that she was the most beautiful being he had ever seen. But he could not. He did not trust himself to speak those words without losing control. Your Majesty, Daniel said carefully, keeping his voice steady. I mean no disrespect to your daughter. She has been a wonderful host. Her kindness has been beyond anything I expected. Then prove it, the Emperor demanded. Look at her. Acknowledge her. Show my court that you are not the rude and uncivilized creature you appear to be. Lavra stepped forward from her position near the door. Her face was pale with worry. She knew the truth about Daniel's situation, and she knew how dangerous this moment was. Your Majesty, if I may speak, she said. The Emperor's 4 eyes turned to her. You may. There is something about humans that we should have explained before this mission began. Something about the way we see the world. The way we see people. The Emperor raised one hand, and the whispers in the room stopped instantly. Explain. Laura took a deep breath. Human eyes are not like yours, Your Majesty. When we look at someone, truly look at them, something happens inside us. Something we cannot always control. The room fell completely silent. Every alien in the chamber was now staring at Laura, waiting for her to continue. But she looked at Daniel, asking silent permission to reveal the truth. Daniel closed his eyes. He had hoped to keep this secret. He had hoped to finish the negotiations and leave before anyone discovered what was happening to him. But that was no longer possible. He nodded slightly, giving Lavra permission to speak. The fate of 2 civilizations now hung on what she would say next. The nobles of the Valrethi court did not know how to react. For 3 days, they had whispered about the rude human who refused to show proper respect. They had mocked him in their private conversations. Some had even suggested throwing him out of the palace and ending all negotiations with Earth. Now they stood in embarrassed silence, their skin shifting through shades of gray and pale blue. These were the colors of shame and regret among their people. They had judged Daniel without understanding him. They had been wrong. Princess Valenthia stepped closer to Daniel. Her eyes, those impossibly deep eyes that held the light of distant stars, searched his face with new understanding. All this time, she said quietly, I thought you hated me. I thought I had done something wrong. I tried so hard to be a good host, to make you feel welcome, and every time you looked away, it felt like a knife in my heart. Daniel's jaw tightened. I am sorry for causing you pain. That was never what I wanted. I know that now. She reached out and touched his arm. Her fingers were cool and smooth against his skin. But I still do not fully understand. You say your ancient brain decided something about me. That it sees me as... What? A possession? No, Daniel said firmly. He finally allowed himself to look at her, though he kept his gaze focused on her forehead, rather than her eyes. It does not see you as a possession. It sees you as the most precious thing in existence. Something to be protected, cherished, kept safe from all harm. The word in my language is mate. The word hung in the air between them. Valenthia's skin flushed with a color Daniel had not seen before. It was warm and soft, somewhere between gold and rose. Mate, she repeated slowly, testing the word on her tongue. This is a word for partnership? For joining together? Yes, but it is more than that. Daniel struggled to find the right words. Among humans, when we find our mate, something changes inside us. We become bound to that person. Their happiness becomes our happiness. Their pain becomes our pain. We would do anything, sacrifice anything, to keep them safe and well. Larva stepped forward to help explain. In ancient times, this bond was essential for survival. Human children are helpless for many years. They need both parents to work together to protect them and provide for them. The mating bond ensured that parents would stay together and care for their young. She looked at Daniel with sympathy in her eyes. But the bond does not only form between people who choose each other. Sometimes it happens without warning, without consent. The ancient brain sees someone and decides, and the modern mind has no say in the matter. Emperor Zorath had been listening carefully. Now he spoke again. So when Commander Hayes looked at my daughter, his ancient brain decided that she was his mate. And he has been fighting that decision ever since. Yes, Your Majesty, Daniel confirmed. Every moment I'm near her, the voice in my head grows louder. It tells me to look at her, to touch her, to declare my feelings in front of your entire court. And every moment, I push that voice down, because I have no right to force my feelings on anyone. The Emperor stroked his chin thoughtfully. And if you were to look into her eyes, what would happen then? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The bond would strengthen. It might become permanent. I might never be able to feel this way about anyone else. I might spend the rest of my life loving someone who does not love me back. Valenthia's eyes widened. That sounds terrible. It would be, Daniel agreed. But that is my burden to bear, not yours. You did not ask for my attention. You did not do anything to encourage it. You are completely innocent in all of this, and you should not have to suffer because of something my brain decided without my permission. A new voice spoke from the crowd. It belonged to an older Velrathi noble, a male with deep blue skin and silver markings around his eyes. Forgive me for speaking, Your Majesty, but I have a question for the human. The Emperor nodded. Speak, Lord Vaneth. The noble stepped forward. Commander Hayes, you say that you are fighting this bond, that you are denying your instincts to protect the princess's freedom. But what if she does not want to be protected from you? Daniel frowned. I do not understand. You have decided on your own that the princess would not want your attention. You have decided that she would find your feelings unwelcome. But have you asked her? Have you given her the chance to make that choice for herself? The question hit Daniel like a blow to the chest. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. He had not asked. He had assumed. Valenthia's skin shifted to a brighter shade of that warm gold rose color. Lord Vaneth raises a fair point. You have been making decisions for me, Commander, protecting me from choices I did not ask to be protected from. I did not mean to, Daniel stammered. I believe you, she said gently. I believe that your intentions were good. But do you not see? By refusing to look at me, by refusing to let me know the truth, you were taking away my ability to respond, to make my own decision about how I feel. She stepped even closer, now only inches away from Daniel. He could smell something like flowers and starlight coming from her skin. His heart was beating so fast he was sure everyone in the room could hear it. For 3 days, I have wondered what I did wrong, she continued. I have questioned my appearance, my behavior, my worth as a person. I have cried alone in my room, thinking that I was somehow disgusting to you. Do you understand how much that hurt? I am so sorry, Daniel said, and his voice cracked with emotion. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you. I know. She reached up and placed her hand on his cheek. Her touch sent electricity racing through his entire body. But perhaps next time, you could trust me to protect myself. Trust me to be strong enough to handle the truth. Daniel finally looked at her. Not at her forehead, not at her shoulder, but directly into her eyes. The bond that had been struggling to form for 3 days suddenly snapped into place with almost physical force. Daniel felt it like a chain wrapped around his heart, connecting him to this alien princess in a way that could never be broken. And in that moment, he saw something in her eyes that took his breath away. He saw the same bond looking back at him. How long? He whispered. Valenthia smiled, and her skin glowed like captured sunlight. Since the first day, when you looked away so quickly, I thought you had seen something terrible in my eyes. I did not realize that you had seen something wonderful and were afraid of it. The court erupted into excited chatter. Nobles turned to each other, their skin flashing through rainbow colors of surprise, delight, and confusion. This was not how any of them had expected this confrontation to end. Emperor Zorath watched his daughter and the boss, human with an expression that mixed wonder and amusement. He had seen many things in his long life, but he had never seen anything quite like this. Well, he said dryly, this is certainly an interesting development in our trade negotiations. Laura Mitchell buried her face in her hands. Her perfectly planned diplomatic mission had just turned into something completely different. She was going to have so much paperwork to file when she got back to Earth. But looking at Daniel and Valenthia, seeing the light that seemed to glow between them, she found that she did not really mind. Some things, she decided, were more important than paperwork. The hours that followed the throne room revelation were unlike anything Daniel had experienced before. The Emperor had called for a grand feast to celebrate what he called the most unexpected diplomatic breakthrough in Volrathi history. The entire palace was now filled with music, laughter, and the smell of exotic foods from 100 different worlds. Daniel sat at the high table beside Princess Valenthia. For the first time since arriving on this world, he was not fighting the urge to look at her. He was looking at her constantly, and she was looking right back at him. And neither of them seemed able to stop. You know, Valenthia said between bites of something that tasted like honey and lightning, my father had many plans for my future. Alliance marriages with powerful families. Political unions that would strengthen the empire. He had a list of suitable partners that was longer than my arm. Daniel felt a flicker of worry. And now? She laughed, and the sound was like music. Now he has torn that list into tiny pieces and thrown it into the ceremonial fire pit. He says that any bond formed between a human and a Velrathi is worth more than 1,000 political marriages. That seems like a big decision to make based on one afternoon. You do not know my father very well yet. She reached over and took his hand under the table. Her skin was cool and smooth, but it seemed to warm wherever it touched his. He has ruled this empire for 600 years. He did not survive that long by making foolish decisions. If he says this bond is valuable, then it is. Laura Mitchell sat at a nearby table, surrounded by Velrathi nobles who were asking her endless questions about humans and their strange bonding instincts. She caught Daniel's eye and gave him a small smile. That said both congratulations. And you have no idea how much trouble you are. Causing me. Daniel smiled back and returned his attention to Valenthia. Can I ask you something? He said, "You can ask me anything. You said that you felt the bond on the first day too. How is that possible?" I thought this was a human thing, a result of our evolution on a death world. Valentia was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. The Volrathi are different from most species in the galaxy. We live for a very long time, sometimes over 1,000 years. But we form very few deep connections. Most of us go through our entire lives without ever finding someone who truly touches our soul. She looked down at their joined hands. When I first saw you, I felt something strange. A pull, a voice that said this one is different. I thought I was imagining it. I told myself it was just curiosity about an unusual alien visitor. But when you looked away from me, when you refused to meet my eyes, I felt empty, lost, like something precious had been taken from me before I even knew I wanted it. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. So we both felt it, from the very beginning. Yes, and we both spent 3 days making ourselves miserable because neither of us was brave enough to speak the truth. To be fair, Daniel said, I thought I was being noble, protecting you from my primitive instincts. And I thought I was being realistic, accepting that a strange alien could never be interested in me. She shook her head. We are both fools, the best kind of fools. They shared a smile that seemed to light up the entire room. At the head table, Emperor Zoreth was deep in conversation with Laura. Human woman had clearly gotten over her initial worry about the diplomatic complications and was now engaged in what appeared to be a very serious discussion. The trade agreement can still move forward, the Emperor was saying. In fact, I believe it should be expanded. If humans and Velrathi can form bonds like the one between your commander and my daughter, then our peoples have more to offer each other than just trade routes. Lavra nodded thoughtfully. You are thinking about cultural exchange, scientific cooperation, perhaps even military alliance, all of those things and more. The Emperor's skin glowed with a warm amber color that signified pleasure and satisfaction. For centuries, the Velrathi have kept ourselves separate from the rest of the galaxy. We traded when necessary, fought when threatened, but we never truly connected with other species. We thought we were too different, too alien. He gestured toward Daniel and Valentia, who were now feeding each other pieces of fruit and laughing like children. But look at them. A human and a Volrathi, as different as two beings can be, and yet they have found something that connects them at the deepest level. If that is possible, then perhaps we have been wrong about our place in the universe. Lavra felt the weight of what the Emperor was saying. This was not just about one trade agreement or one unexpected romance. This was about the future of two civilizations. Your Majesty, I have to be honest with you. When Commander Hayes and I came here, we were hoping for nothing more than safe passage through your space. We never imagined anything like this, and yet here we are. The Emperor smiled, showing rows of small silver teeth. The universe has a way of surprising us, does it not? Across the room, Daniel had noticed that Lord Vaneth, the noble who had asked the crucial question in the throne room, was watching them with interest. He excused himself from Valentia for a moment and walked over to thank the older Volrathi. Your question changed everything, Daniel said, bowing in the Volrathi style that Lara had taught him. If you had not spoken up, I might have kept my silence forever. Lord Vaneth's skin rippled with a pattern that Daniel now recognized as modest pleasure. I have lived for many centuries, Commander. I have seen young people make fools of themselves in countless ways. But the most tragic foolishness is always when two people who belong together stay apart because they are too afraid to take a chance. You speak from experience? The old noble was quiet for a long moment. I had a chance once, a very long time ago. A merchant from a distant world who made me feel things I had never felt before. But I was afraid. I was proud. I told myself that a Velrathi noble could never lower himself to bond with an outsider. His skin shifted to a deep sand blue. She left. She went back to her world, and I never saw her again. I have spent 500 years regretting my cowardice. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. When I saw you today, fighting against your own heart to do what you thought was right, I saw myself. And I knew that I could not let you make the same mistake I did. Daniel felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Thank you, Lord Vaneth, truly. Do not thank me. Just promise me that you will treasure what you have found, that you will never let pride or fear keep you from the princess's side. I promise. Lord Vaneth nodded, satisfied. Good. Now go back to her. She is watching you, and if you stay away too long, she might decide to come over here and retrieve you herself. Daniel looked over his shoulder and saw that Valentia was indeed watching him with an expression that was both amused and impatient. He laughed and bowed again to Lord Vaneth before hurrying back to her side. What were you talking about? She asked as he sat down. The importance of not being a fool. Ah. She leaned against his shoulder, and Daniel felt a warmth spread through his entire body. That sounds like a very valuable lesson. It is. And I intend to learn it very well. Huh? The feast continued late into the night. Music played, dancers performed, and the great hall of the Velrathi Palace filled with joy and celebration. At the center of it all, a human and a princess sat together, their hands intertwined, their eyes locked on each other. They had both spent their lives thinking they were alone, thinking that no one would ever truly understand them. But now they had found each other against all odds, across the vast emptiness of space dot, and neither of them intended to ever let go. 3 months had passed since that fateful day in the throne room. The trade agreement between Earth and the Velrathi Empire had been signed, expanded, and celebrated across both civilizations. Human ships now traveled freely through Velrathi space, cutting their journey times by 2/3. Velrathi merchants had begun visiting Earth, bringing technologies and goods that humans had only dreamed of before. But for Daniel Hayes, the most important change was much more personal. He stood on the balcony of his new quarters in the Velrathi Palace, looking out over a city that had become his second home. The buildings were made of crystal and light, rising toward the sky like frozen music. 2 moons hung in the purple sky, casting silver shadows across everything below. Valentia came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Her skin had shifted to that warm gold rose color that Daniel had learned meant happiness and love. What are you thinking about? She asked so softly. How strange life is. He turned in her arms so he could look at her face. Even after 3 months, the sight of her still made his heart beat faster. 3 months ago, I was just a diplomat on a routine mission. I expected to spend a few weeks negotiating trade routes and then go home. I never imagined any of this. Neither did I. She smiled up at him. I was a princess with no real purpose. My father gave me duties to keep me busy, but I always felt like I was just waiting for my life to begin. And then you walked into our throne room and everything changed. Daniel leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. It was a gesture of intimacy that the Velrathi found deeply meaningful, even more so than a kiss. He had learned so many things about her people in these past months. Their customs, their beliefs, their dreams for the future, and he had shared his own humanity with them in return. The door to their quarters opened, and Laura Mitchell stepped onto the balcony. She was dressed in the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, which meant that something official was happening. Sorry to interrupt, she said, though her smile suggested she was not very sorry at all. But the Emperor is asking for both of you. He says it is time. Daniel and Valentia exchanged a look. They had known this moment was coming. They had spent weeks preparing for it. But now that it was here, Daniel felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach. Time for what? Valentia asked, playing innocent. Lavra rolled her eyes. Time for the ceremony, princess. The one you've been planning since the day after you two finally stopped being idiots. The ceremony she was referring to was something that had never happened before in the history of either species. A formal union between a human and a Volrathi. A binding that would join not just two people, but two entire civilizations. Emperor Zareth had proposed the idea a month ago, after watching his daughter and the human commander grow closer every day. He had called it a symbol of the new relationship between their peoples. A sign that humans and Volrathi could be more than just trading partners. They could be family. Daniel had agreed immediately. Valentia had agreed even faster. Now they walked through the palace halls toward the great chamber where the ceremony would take place. Servants bowed as they passed. Nobles smiled and offered words of congratulation. The entire palace seemed to glow with excitement and joy. When they reached the great chamber, Daniel stopped in amazement. Thousands of beings filled the room. Volrathi nobles in their finest robes, their skin shimmering with colors of celebration. Human diplomats and officers who had traveled across the galaxy to witness this moment. Representatives from dozens of other species who had heard about this unprecedented union and wanted to see it for themselves. At the far end of the chamber, Emperor Zareth waited on a raised platform. He was wearing the ceremonial crown of his office, a circle of pure light that floated above his head without any visible support. Beside him stood a human woman in similar ceremonial dress, a representative from the Earth Council who had been given the honor of officiating alongside the Emperor. Daniel recognized her as Admiral Catherine Gray, one of the most respected leaders in Earth's government. She had personally signed off on his original mission and had been closely following the developments ever since. Commander Hayes, she said as Daniel and Valentia approached the platform. You were sent here to negotiate a trade agreement. I must say, you have somewhat exceeded your mission parameters. Daniel smiled despite his nerves. I apologize for the complications, Admiral. Do not apologize. Her stern face softened into something close to warmth. You have achieved something that generations of diplomats could never have dreamed of. An alliance based not on politics or profit, but on genuine connection. Genuine love. She turned to address the assembled crowd. Today we witness a union that was impossible until it happened. A human and a Volrathi, two beings from worlds light years apart, have found each other. They have looked into each other's eyes and seen something that transcends species, culture, and biology. They have seen a partner, a companion, a mate. Emperor Zareth stepped forward to continue. My people have long believed that we are alone in the universe, that no other species could ever truly understand us. But this human has proven us wrong. He has shown that love recognizes no boundaries, that the heart knows no borders. He looked at Daniel with 4 eyes full of warmth. Commander Daniel Hayes, you came to our world as a stranger. You will leave it as my son. Daniel felt tears building in his eyes. He had never known his own father. Growing up on Earth, he had always felt incomplete, like a puzzle with missing pieces. But standing here, surrounded by thousands of beings from across the galaxy, he finally felt whole. I never expected to find a family among the stars, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But that is exactly what has happened. The Volrathi have welcomed me, accepted me, and trusted me with their greatest treasure. He turned to Valentia. Her eyes were glowing with that inner light that he had fallen in love with from the very first moment. Valentia, he said, 3 months ago, I could not look at you because I was afraid. Afraid of what I felt. Afraid of what might happen. Afraid of losing control. He took her hands in his. I am not afraid anymore. I have seen who you are, who you truly are, and I love everything I have seen. Your kindness, Your strength. Your patience with a foolish human who could not figure out how to say what was in his heart. Valenthia laughed, and the sound rang through the chamber like silver bells. And I have seen who you are, she replied. A man who would deny himself rather than impose on someone else. A man who would suffer in silence rather than cause pain. A man whose love burned so bright that he was terrified it would blind me. She reached up and touched his face. But I am not blinded, Daniel. I am illuminated. Your love does not overwhelm me. It lifts me up, makes me more than I was before. She leaned close and whispered, so quietly that only he could hear. Now look at me. Really look at me. And do not look away ever again. Daniel looked into her eyes. The bond that had formed 3 months ago, the one that had been growing stronger every day, suddenly blazed into full life. It was like a fire that burned without consuming, a light that filled every corner of his soul. And in that moment, Daniel Hayes, once a lonely diplomat from a death world called Earth, knew that he was finally home. The crowd erupted into cheering. Velrathi and humans celebrated together, their voices mixing in a sound that had never been heard before in the history of the galaxy. Admiral Grey was smiling widely. Emperor Zorath was weeping tears of joy that glowed golden on his silver cheeks. Laura Mitchell had given up all pretense of professionalism and was sobbing openly. But Daniel noticed none of this. He saw only Valenthia. He heard only the beating of her heart, somehow in perfect rhythm with his own dot in the vastness of space. Across light years of cold and empty darkness, 2 souls had found each other. They had looked into each other's eyes and seen not a stranger, not an alien, but a reflection of their own deepest hopes. And in that looking, they had found forever. The end.